All right, welcome everyone to this afternoon's session. You're in Palace Ballroom 3, and this afternoon's attack is practical attacks against mobile device management solutions. So Daniel Brodie and Michael Shaulov are going to be presenting. So without further ado, I'll pass the floor.
All right. Sorry. Just a second, sorry. I didn't say apply.
That's okay.
I just need to do this. Just need to do keep this configuration. There you go.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me and Daniel for this session. Basically, over the next hour, we're going to discuss about targeted mobile attacks and how those attacks can evolve basically to penetrate or circumvent mobile device management solution. So first of all, let Daniel introduce himself.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Brodie. So I've done a lot of vulnerability research, exploitation on both PC, OS X, Linux, Windows, and then I've moved to mobile to Android and iOS. And since I've joined Lacoon, I've gone more into the defense side of things, where I've been researching and developing our app analysis framework, where we automatically analyze using dynamic and static analysis both spy phones, mobile malware, and detect exploits and things of the sort.
And as for myself, my name is Michael Shaulov. I've been in the basically doing mobile cybersecurity research for the last decade or so. So about 12 years ago, I started to work for the Army and mostly around mobile cybersecurity. So later on, I was doing research for a defense contractor, mostly focused on feature phones like the old Nokias, smartphones, tablets, UMTS and GSM core networks and radio access networks. So quite a lot of experience with research around mobile security. And since basically 2 years ago, when we've seen that most of the stuff that was used by government agency and law enforcement were moving into the cyber criminal world in terms of mobile attacks, we founded Lacoon, where we basically address the targeted mobile threats, targeted malware, and etc. And that will be the things that we're going to discuss today. So what is our agenda? Basically, we're going to start with some description about targeted mobile threats and specifically spy phones. Then we describe what are mobile device management solutions and how do they work, and especially around the secure containers, which is the most of the security over there is done by that component. And then we'll test how difficult it is or easy to circumvent and penetrate into the secure container and fetch the enterprise content that basically being delivered into the mobile devices. And eventually we'll summarize and give certain recommendations of how to protect against those attacks. So what are basically targeted mobile threats and how do they differ from the general mobile malware that you probably heard of? So most of the buzz today around the mobile malware is on consumer targeted or mass malware that is infecting primarily Android devices and usually used by cyber criminals to conduct financial fraud. So essentially those malware send premium text messages or break bank two-factor authentication. And those are usually not very sophisticated piece of malware, at least at the current stage. While there is another category of something which is usually branded as spy phones, but effectively it's something which we call a mobile remote access Trojan, which is more sophisticated tools that are designed to compromise a mobile device and basically to allow a third party to access everything which is on the mobile device, all the content, and essentially also take over all the sensors of the mobile device. And there is, well, different reasons that those tools are being developed. So from parental control, but effectively most of what they are being used for is either personal espionage, corporate espionage, law enforcement work and stuff like that. And the capabilities that are usually those mobile remote access Trojan MRATs have are quite broad. So for example, you can take over all the sensors and hardware of the mobile device. You can activate the microphone of the mobile device and listen to everything which is being said in the room, usually in real time. You can activate the GPS of the device and track the location of the owner. You can listen to phone calls, text messages, and most interestingly enough is that you can basically access the content which is delivered to the device. So you can access the mailbox and even proprietary, like third-party application like WhatsApp, Skype, Viber, etc. So over the last year, we've seen a couple of high-profile, I would say, examples. First one was FinFisher, essentially a law enforcement mobile remote access Trojan that was targeting individuals in certain countries. There was a mobile remote access Trojan component in the Red October APT campaign. And there was also an attack on Tibetan activists, and there was also a mobile remote access Trojan component in the Lucky Cat APT campaign. So those are some of the things that we've seen during the last year. And when we look on the different types of MRATs, we usually divide them into three categories. The first one is a commercial surveillance software, which is sold on the internet for about, well, between 50 to 300 US dollars. And FlexiSpy is one of the most famous surveillance tools. Maybe you've heard about them. The other category is basically code that sometimes open source, like AndroRat, that circulates in the on the internet, and you can basically download that code, compile your own remote access Trojan, and customize it. And last is the most expensive ones, essentially law enforcement tools like FinFisher, which is being sold to government, but there is like a handful of other companies that provide the same MRATs, and those are more expensive tools. So the interesting thing when you look across all those categories is basically that the capabilities are practically the same. They will always allow you to access all the sensors, extract information, and etc. Even the operational mode is quite similar. So for example, once they're being installed, they are completely invisible to the user. If you look on the mobile device without any forensics software, you will not be able to clearly see that the device is compromised. And even command and control architecture is very similar. So for example, if the mobile device doesn't have internet access, you can control the remote access Trojan using text messages. You can send command using text messages or SMS. Now, what is basically different is two things, the infection vector and the pricing. So in terms of the infection vector, usually commercial MRATs, they are physically, they're infecting the device using physical access. AndroRats and the code that is circulating in the internet, they usually repackage applications. So you take Angry Birds, you introduce the rat inside of it and recompile it. And the law enforcement, like FinFisher, seems to be that they are utilizing some kind of remote exploitation capabilities. That's why they are so expensive, traded at hundreds of thousands US dollars. Now, the interesting thing is that the commercial surveillance software are so popular that if you want to buy, you have benchmarks on the internet that will basically tell you which tool you should buy to basically fulfill your spying objectives, I would call it. Now, this is quite interesting. So effectively, one of the things that we conducted is a large-scale experiment. Basically, we partnered with several mobile carriers. And what we've done is we did a telemetry survey on their network. So we were looking into the infection rates of actively infected devices and how they communicate with the command and control, how the devices when they communicate with the command and control. So we surveyed around a network of 650,000 subscribers over 2 days. And basically we were able to understand how many subscribers are infected, and also using a user agent and packet property correlation, we were able to understand what is the operating system which is compromised. So those are the results from our last survey at June 2013. Overall, we had 608 devices which we identified as compromised. And the interesting part, the really interesting part, is that 47% of the infected devices were running iOS. Now, as you probably know, most of the criticism around mobile security is being always targeted on Android devices, and that's true, like the security there is not as good as on iOS. But the reality is that when you talk about targeted threats, it seems to be that iOS is quite vulnerable as well. Also another interesting thing that we found, that 13% of the devices which are infected were running iOS 6. Now, that means that those infections are quite new, because the commercial mobile remote access Trojan, they do not survive operating system upgrade. So, as you can see, basically the infection rate on iOS is higher than the iOS market share globally, and specifically also in the country where we did the survey. And those are great news for all iOS fans, because basically you can both enjoy the slick user experience that iOS provide and get spied on. Now, another interesting result was that we were able to basically identify different families. So basically understand how many infections we have from every family. As you can see, there is one family which was specifically predominant during the test, but 51% of the infections were scattered across 16 different families of mobile surveillance, mobile MRATs. So this really sounds, first of all, scary, and second thing, because those tools really take over the device, it has significant implication on how mobility is being done within enterprises. And for that, we would like to see how enterprises are being prepared and how they can secure their initiatives. So the primary thing that the enterprises are basically using today is mobile device management solution and secure containers. And let's discuss a bit what it is and how it works. So effectively, mobile device management is basically a management tool, management configuration tool that is being used by enterprises, IT departments to control over the mobile devices that are accessing enterprise data. And since a lot of the initiatives today involve BYOD initiatives, and essentially the employees are bringing their own personal device and asking the IT department to connect the device to the corporate network, the primary tool that enterprises are using in that type of scenario is a secure container, which allows you to separate between business data and personal data on the device. So MDMs are quite popular. That's statistics from Gartner. Over the next 5 years, 65% of the enterprises will use MDM solution. And let's dive a bit deeper into what MDMs do provide. So the first thing that they provide is software management. Essentially, you can push enterprise applications to the mobile device. You can configure the network, so you can configure VPNs on the mobile devices. You can control the hardware. So for example, you can block the camera when an employee enters a specific facility. And security-wise, they provide certain functionalities. For example, remote wipe. So you can wipe a device if it gets lost, or for example, detect if the device is jailbroken or rooted. And effectively, you can also encrypt full disk encryption on the device. Now, all the leading MDM solutions, they do provide secure container. So over here, it's a list of the guys who are in the Magic Quadrant in Gartner, and they all have a secure container or some form of this technology embedded and enabled in their MDM solution. And the way that it technically works is as follows. Basically, all mobile operating systems, they have application sandbox. So every application that you download, either it's like on Android or iOS, is unable to access the storage and space of the other application. So if you have Facebook, it's unable to access the storage of Twitter on the device. Okay, that's at least like not by design. So secure containers are effectively a normal application without any elevated privileges that basically protects itself from other applications using that property. And additionally, it provides two enhancements. The first thing is a secure communication to the corporate network. So effectively, when it pulls the emails, it secures them using SSL or VPN. And the second thing is that basically it encrypts all the storage on the device. So every email, basically it is encrypted on the device. So it's encryption of data in motion, encryption of data at rest. And there's a couple of other technologies that are being marketed as secure bubbles, wrappers, multi-persona. Effectively, all those technologies, they use the same thing behind the scenes, okay, like the same mechanism. Now, as you can understand, there are three assumptions that are being taken by the secure containers in order to protect the data. The first thing is encryption of the business data. The second thing is encryption of the communication to the business. And the third thing is to detect jailbreak and routing to understand if the mobile device is compromised. Now, from this point on, I will let Daniel to test these assumptions, if they do really work.
Hi, thank you, Michael. So as Michael just stated, there were basically three features that MDM or secure containers try to use to be able to protect themselves from the mobile OS, and those were encryption between the secure container and the server, that's transferring the corporate data, encrypting the corporate data that is as it is being saved onto the phone, and the last one is being able to try to detect when a device has been compromised using some kind of vulnerability. Okay, here. So let's show you the Android demo. I'm sorry, it's going to be a little bit difficult because of this resolution.
I'll just change the resolution, I guess.
I can't, then I won't see it.
Oh, okay.
I don't see it. Okay, it's a second. Yeah. So we have here a standard Galaxy S3 device running a standard, one of the leading secure containers in the market. And it also has a, let's remove that sidebar. And also has a malicious application which was installed either through spear phishing or something of the sort. And here you can see the malicious application. It's a very malicious game. And as I start off a secure container, and I can open up one of the emails. Now, the thing that's important to stress here, this isn't something that's specific to this specific secure container in any way. This is something that is this would work against any secure container implementation. Obviously, the details would have to change a little bit. And here you saw meanwhile that the email popped up. Let's open it up, and as you can see, this is our email which the secure container was supposed to protect and secure from being extracted. Let's take a different one. So yeah, so I was saying this is not specific. This is not something that is inherited to this specific secure container, and it is something that any secure container will be vulnerable to. And here we go. So again, so this a secure container whose purpose is to secure the emails, make sure they cannot be extracted by third-party applications. When the device is compromised, cannot actually provide that feature. Cannot actually provide that features in the real world. Now, so the solution, the way we would want to one would want to extract a confidential corporate data from a phone would require a few steps. The first one will obviously be to try to infect the device with your code. This can be done trivially by getting the user to install a malicious app through spear phishing, or by having the app on Google Play or something of the sort, or even having physical access to the device. There are some problems or some things like bouncers or other app analysis frameworks who work on the Play Store, but most of those have been able to be easily bypassed, as people demonstrated, using some kind of two-stage solution where you download part of the code later to run later, and then you can really control who are the people that are running your code and things of the sort. And then we just need to root the device by exploiting one of the vulnerabilities available for Android. And again, practically every flagship device for Android has a root vulnerability for it, whether it was the S3 was Exynos, or it was the S4 active, whether it was now a bunch of LG phones, or HTC One even has a root vulnerability out now. So that's really not the problem by having a root vulnerability available to it. And then you just need to exploit that vulnerability. Again, because this is an S3 device, we specifically use the Exynos vulnerability. And you don't even, you can just hide your binary that you're using with SUID and anywhere which is executable. This means that most generic root detectors used by MDMs will not be able to detect it because they cannot actually see the file. And then you have an easy way to run a SUID binary, get the root permissions, not have it be detected by the MDM that the device is rooted, and that you have your elevated privileges. Now, we're still not there yet. We still have the data from the secure container still encrypted on the phone, as we said earlier. We still need to be able to get this data out somehow. Well, luckily for us, the secure container, when the user wants to actually use his phone, has to decrypt the information and show it on the screen. That's a very convenient time to actually be able to have the data in clear text in the phone. So all we have to do is wait for some event log in Android that tells us when the email is being read, wait for that event to pop up, and then we just need to access a secure container using our elevated privileges, open up the heap for the process, search for the signature for the email, the signature for emails in the heap, copy it out, send it home, and there we have it. A very easy way to basically grab the email out of the secure container with really not a lot of work. Now, even though we used the root exploit for this demonstration, recently there's been a lot of buzz around system exploits for Android, where you don't get the root user, you only get the system user. That would be effective here as well. We don't have to have only root. This would also work, because once you're a system user in Android, you can practically run and any code you want as any other Android application. So basically we're just going to have to run our code as the user ID of the secure container, and then we can access its logs, access the heap, or anything else that we needed to do, and just as easily as we would have before. Now for iOS, here. Oh. Okay, so this is a, just a second. Where's the folder? There it is. Okay, so this is a standard iOS device. Running iOS 6.13. Using, oh, again, did you see that? Sorry. Okay, open up the secure container. And again, I'm going to repeat, as I said this earlier, this is not anything that is specific to this secure container. This is an inherent problem in any secure container, that they cannot protect themselves from a vulnerable operating system. Just a second, let it load up. There you go. Okay. So as we open the emails, you get them clear text, unencrypted. Let's do another one. There we go. So for iOS, Again, we're going to have to infect the device. Obviously, on iOS, this is a little bit more difficult. In this case, we're using a tethered jailbreak, but and there's other jailbreaks available. This again depending on the iOS version. Although we also know that there have been 0 days being sold on the black market, as we saw in the news, for a nice hefty sum. And bypassing the detection of jailbreak detection by MDMs and secure containers is something that the community is doing very well with things like XCon and other tools like that. And we've had to obviously do some also for good here. And then we have to install once you have your elevated privileges, you just have to install the backdoor. We do this by making sure that the secure container loads our malicious dynamic library once the secure container loads up. And then we have to remove and hide any trace of the jailbreak, both from the user and from the MDM. Now, once the dynamic library is in memory, what we need to do is just, our malicious dynamic library is in memory in the secure container. We just need to hook the secure container using standard Objective-C hooking mechanisms. Again, this is stuff that's been done outside with mobile substrate and things of the sort. We get notified when an email is read, pulled out from the encrypted storage into the UI of the device, and then that's our cue to go to the UI of the secure container, pull it out from there, and send it home. Now, so basically, the conclusion that we can come to this from this demonstration is that basically secure containers are really, really dependent on the integrity of the host operating system. If your host operating system is compromised because of a root jailbreak or a root or a jailbreak vulnerability, then they can't actually secure themselves from the attacker using these elevated privileges of doing what he wants. So if the host system is uncompromised, the standard OS, mobile OS sandboxing mechanisms should be more than enough to provide the security for the content. If the host system is compromised, the secure containers do not have enough power in the mobile operating system to actually do anything to protect themselves from it. And this is something that we've been through before. I mean, if you look at the PC world, we've had many, many use cases where people in the PC world have been trying to protect their processes from a host operating system, either because of attacks or DRM and things like that. This never works. You cannot, as an application, you cannot protect yourself and your content from a vulnerability in the operating system, or from an operating system or somebody in higher privileges which is trying to attack your process. Let's give Michael back the stage.
Thanks, Daniel. So basically, let's give some sort of summary up until now. So essentially, we've looked on MDMs, and essentially MDMs are an important thing in mobile initiatives because of a couple of things. First of all, you need management, so you need to management and understand what to deploy application, etc. Everything that we discussed so far, and also you would need to enforce certain compliance on the devices. Now, the main use case, of course, is data leakage prevention. So, for example, with secure containers, you can block the user from copy-pasting that specific email or that specific document from the secure container to his Dropbox. So you have a control which basically prevents the user intentionally of doing, let's say, things that you don't want him to do. Now, additionally, you have it provides also additional security against physical loss. So, for example, if someone is losing his device, you can remotely wipe all that content and etc. But there are several key issues over here. First of all, as we've seen with the MRATs, there is quite a high motivation for a potential adversary to hack into a mobile device or to infect a mobile device. And 3 reasons basically. First of all, once we provide mobile devices access into the corporate network, you have on the mobile device, you have basically everything that they are looking for. You have the documents, you have the emails, you have all the traditional assets that they are usually looking to steal. The second thing is not only that you have the traditional assets, you also have the sensors. So effectively, you can also activate the microphone in the middle of the board meeting of the bank or something like that and gain access to information that is not documented even. And the third thing is that at this stage, there is pretty much zero visibility for the security professionals, for the IT guys to understand that this mobile device, which is outside of the perimeter, is infected. So essentially, if you were able to infect a mobile device, you would probably stay much longer. The infection will stay much longer on the mobile device, and there is no capability for the IT guys to figure out that. So all that basically drives us into the conclusion that there are quite significant commercial implications to all that. Effectively, like in terms of corporate espionage and etc. And as we've seen, MDMs and mobile device management, they don't really solve this problem. So because we already had a couple of good years with fighting against malware, and especially the last couple of years targeted malware, we know that there is no silver bullet solution for that, and eventually you need to have some kind of layer approach. So one of the things that you can basically say, okay, let's do OS hardening, which is important, and exploit mitigation. We need to do some kind of detection. We need to do some kind of prevention, or at least to minimize the attack surface. And effectively, you can choose a very aggressive way of doing that. So you can, for example, decide that all the Android devices that you have within the enterprise are going to run some customized ROM version that you found on the internet. That's an option. You can reroute all the traffic from all the mobile devices through your next generation firewalls and run your full inspection on that traffic. And eventually you can even, using MDMs, basically, you can force a whitelisting of application on the mobile device. So you can decide that the devices will only run Salesforce, for example, and you can even remove Safari from the device. That's basically really minimizes the attack surface, but it might be somewhat practical with corporate devices that the enterprises issues to the employees, but effectively if you try to do it on BYOD, if you try to enforce such a strict policies on personal devices, that will probably fail, and the users will throw away their mobile devices from the window. I'm just kidding. That's my friend who tried to fix his screen. Now, basically what we proposing, and that's the approach that we are taking at Lacoon, and what we develop is a more granular approach that eventually does two things. First of all, we need to conduct real-time risk calculation or risk assessment for the device, and continuously, not only when someone opens the email or activates the app. And we need to look on a couple of layers. For example, you should do some kind of dynamic and static app inspection for the application that the user downloads, so in order to detect exploits and etc. The other thing that you probably would like to do is to look on the general behavior of the mobile device. So for example, if the device is sending text messages when the screen is off, that's probably quite suspicious. And eventually, there are also situations where the device is more vulnerable. So for example, when someone connects to the corporate network or even just uses the device when he's on a public Wi-Fi, for example, in Starbucks, the device is quite susceptible to man-in-the-middle attacks, which can trigger drive-by downloads and etc. So also the environment can be a factor in calculating that risk. Now, once we were able to calculate the risk of the device, we can basically enforce dynamic controls. And we need to enforce them dynamic because we don't want to interfere or lock down the device when the user is not infected or not vulnerable. So, for example, you can do granular rerouting of traffic. So if someone downloads now a new app that you want to vet or to understand how it behaves, you can reroute the traffic of that specific app, or to block the traffic of a malware and to contain it on the device, so it will not exfiltrate any information from the device. Other things that you can basically do is to take the risk score that is being calculated and feed that risk score into either network access controllers or MDM solution, and then when the risk is high, to block the malware, to block the device from accessing the enterprise network. So, for example, when it's infected, it's not going to pull any more documents, or it's not going to have access to the emails. And that's more or less the scope of what we think that should be done. Of course, I would also mention that in terms of OS hardening, currently the vendors are doing some work over there. Both Apple, Samsung with Knox, and even Google with Android SE. But eventually, let's just recap and summarize everything that we've seen today. So targeted mobile attacks are in fact a reality, and we have such attacks in the wild. We do see that MDMs and secure container cannot protect effectively the enterprise content from being leaked or being accessed by those malware. And we do think that we should think about a very granular and adaptive multi-layer approach of how to detect compromised devices and to enforce policies around them. That's basically the end of our talk. So if you have any questions, there is a microphone over there. Yeah. So that's basically the approach that they are taking on Knox. They're trying to validate different properties of the operating system, but still you cannot. You can just do like periodic sampling of the operating system to understand that it's not compromised. It gets you somewhere, but not completely. Yeah. So, so the question was with solution like Watchdogs that essentially they have some DRM component on the document, right? If that prevents from the email being leaked. We didn't try the approach on Watchdog. Okay, we didn't do any pen testing on Watchdog, but I believe that you would see the same effect. Basically, when they open the document, it will be visible to the user. So it will be decrypted, and you will be able to access and fetch it from the memory. The malware. So you'll be able to screen scrap it. John.
Good afternoon, Michael. So did you run any of your tests with the iOS jailbreak detection on with good?
Yeah, so effectively we need to discuss it after the conference. We do have, we presented that talk in BlackHat Europe in March, and we had this discussion as well. We have like some new findings about how you can bypass the jailbreak completely. You know, that the jailbreak detection will not work effectively. Basically, we didn't want to talk about it here because we didn't disclose it yet. Yeah, we do it afterwards. Yeah. Sorry.
In your research, you try to read the data from the MDMs. Have you tried to inject packets into the MDM and go into the corporate network?
We didn't try that. There is a question there.
Actually, a similar question to the previous person. I'm curious, in any of your experiments, were you able to jailbreak the latest version of operating system and circumvent jailbreak detection of the latest version of the application you were testing?
Yes, so basically we do have now a proof of concept that is doing that. We didn't want to discuss it so far because we didn't disclose it yet, but you're able to do it.
Can you elaborate on the law enforcement example that you gave earlier in the session? Just talk a little bit more about
FinFisher?
Yes, FinFisher.
Okay, so FinFisher or effectively like Gamma Group is a they were like a German company. Now they're based in UK, and basically they develop all kind of remote access Trojan, both for PC and for mobile devices, which are sold to governments for law enforcement. What happened in that specific incident was that it was sold to a government in the Gulf region, and that government was using that specific Emirates to infect human rights activists.
There are more. You have more examples other than Gamma Group. You have like Hacking Team have their own one, and I don't remember that one. Vupen, no, Vupen only sells vulnerabilities, but you have a few other companies which do sell actual, companies which are private companies, but they do sell it to governments of spying software. with vulnerabilities and everything included.
Hi, I think I heard you say something about Knox. Did you do any of your research on Knox or VMware's Horizon to be able to see about you any more mitigation?
We are now basically looking into Knox, so we don't have any results yet.
Michael, one question. If I gave you an iOS 614 strong password MDM protected solution, under what physical conditions, how much time, and would there be any notice from the user in you being able to bypass the container in question?
I think there were like demonstration of that, right? So the question was if on a new version of iOS, if it's protected with a strong key pass, right? How much time will it take to break the key pass, right? That's basically the question.
Well,
we don't have any results on that. We didn't test that, but there is like other company which I think via forensics that they were doing some research about how fast or how slow you can break the key pass on iOS.
This is not a question on the control of the key pass. It's a question of whether or not the demo that we saw today can be applied to an iOS device that, you know, I leave in the washroom for, let's say, 20 minutes, and then you're able to have access to my email.
If it's 20 minutes? I don't know. I don't think that 20 minutes will be enough to break it.
Any comments on the availability or the efficacy of using antivirus, like traditional PC solutions like anti-malware to detect this activity?
Yeah, so we checked a couple of, so there are like quite a few nice papers that you can search on the web that tested how effective antivirus on mobile devices. The test that we did by ourselves was that basically in terms of detecting the actual exploit, which is embedded within the application, is quite straightforward to basically bypass. The AVs that are well, most of the AVs now on mobile, they basically signature based. So as long as you obfuscate a little bit the malware, you drop from 100% detection to 0.
Hi, at the beginning of the talk, you mentioned that there was infections by mobile OS, and you surveyed like 650,000 devices. How did you do the survey? And it wasn't clear to me, what was the overall infection rate of those 650,000?
So within that, it was like 608 devices infected.
608 devices?
608, yeah.
Of 650,000?
Yeah.
So 1 in 1,000?
1 in 1,000, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Any more questions we should discuss? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you, guys.